The words hung in the air longer than they should have, echoing in my ears like a distant bell tolling in an empty cathedral. "You're so understanding," my friend said, her voice filled with admiration. The compliment came from a place I couldn't understand, for a situation I wasn't even aware existed. I stood there, frozen, unsure how to respond, as if I had been thrust into a script I hadn't studied, performing lines I never knew were mine to say. Understanding. It felt like a word that had been placed in front of me like a puzzle piece, one I hadn't even realized was missing. But there it was, her voice thick with sincerity, her face glowing with the belief that I had somehow handled something with grace and maturity. And me? I was standing in front of her, my mind racing, trying to connect the dots, but the pieces simply weren't fitting. Understanding. I repeated, trying to buy myself some time, my voice unsteady. I wanted to ask her, demand of her what the hell she was talking about, but my lips froze as I saw the innocent trust in her eyes. She was convinced that I was on the same page. Hell, she was convinced I was the hero in some story she had written in her head. But I hadn't the faintest clue what she was referring to. "Yeah," she said, nodding slowly, the smile not leaving her face. "I mean, I know it's been a lot. I was worried you'd blow up, you know, but you were really cool about it." The puzzle pieces still weren't clicking. I didn't blow up at anything. No, this wasn't a proud moment of victory where I'd held my tongue and kept my composure. I wasn't some noble figure who had made a difficult choice with grace and understanding. I was just confused. About what? I finally asked, my words clipped, though I didn't mean to sound harsh. It was more like a desperate plea to fill the silence, to make sense of something that had just been dropped into my lap. I needed to know what I had missed, what had gone unnoticed in my life. What was I supposed to be understanding? What had I missed? My friend's smile wavered for just a second, the edge of her lips turning downward, and I felt the shift in her energy. She didn't seem as confident anymore. "Oh," she said, taking a breath, clearly trying to recalibrate. "About Jake." The name hit me like a punch to the gut, though I was sure she hadn't meant for it to. Jake. It had been a few weeks since he'd entered the picture, but my mind raced now, trying to connect the dots in real time. Jake was her boyfriend? Ex-boyfriend? I didn't even know where they stood. I didn't know anything about their relationship, and suddenly, here she was, expecting me to understand something I hadn't been told about. Jake. I repeated again, this time with more confusion than I cared to show. Her expression softened with what I could only describe as empathy. "Yeah, you know, how you didn't freak out when I told you what happened between us. I didn't expect you to just let it go so easily, but you did. You're being so understanding about everything." The world around me tilted just slightly, and I felt that familiar wave of unease wash over me. My hands, suddenly clammy, began to fidget with the edge of my shirt. I knew she was talking about something big. I just had no idea what it was. And that, my friends, is how I found myself standing in the middle of my favorite coffee shop, trying desperately to hold it together, as my friend congratulated me for being a rock in a situation I wasn't even aware existed. "Listen," I said slowly, trying to grasp onto the fragments of my thoughts, "I don't think you're telling me the whole story here. What happened between you and Jake?" Her face flushed, and for a brief moment, I saw something flicker behind her eyes, a hint of guilt or maybe shame. But it was gone so quickly that I almost convinced myself I had imagined it. "We broke up," she said, almost too casually. "Well, sort of. I mean, we didn't break up for good." She hesitated, then added, "But we're on a break." I blinked at her, trying to make sense of what she had said. A break? The words felt foreign on my tongue, a concept I hadn't thought about since high school. Breaks were for people who couldn't decide whether they wanted to stay together or not. It was the limbo between relationships, and yet, here she was, telling me it was normal. "You didn't know?" she asked, and this time her voice had a note of surprise to it. "I thought you knew. We talked about it at the party last weekend." I felt the blood drain from my face. The party. My mind went back to that evening. People everywhere, music blaring, laughter echoing through the halls. And then there was Jake. He had been there, hadn't he? But he was mostly with her, and I, being the ever-observing friend, had tried to keep my distance, respecting their space. And that was when it hit me, the whole time, they had been navigating a breakup, and I had no idea. "No," I muttered, shaking my head. "You never mentioned anything about breaking up or taking a break. You just said you were going through stuff." She shifted awkwardly, her gaze dropping to the floor for a moment. "I guess I didn't want to make it awkward. You were so happy to see us together, and I didn't want to burden you with it. I swallowed hard, the sudden realization crashing down on me like a wave. She had kept me in the dark. Not only that, but she had expected me to just understand. It felt like I had been playing a game without knowing the rules, and now, I was left standing at the edge of it all, struggling to catch up. I felt a knot tighten in my chest, not just from the betrayal of being kept out of the loop, but from the crushing weight of realizing I had been unintentionally left on the sidelines. "You've been hiding this from me?" I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. She looked up at me then, her eyes wide with a mixture of guilt and frustration. "I didn't mean to. I just didn't want to make you feel, I don't know, awkward or uncomfortable. I didn't think you'd get it. And honestly, I wasn't sure how to bring it up. So, when you didn't react the way I thought you would, it kind of threw me off. I thought you'd be upset, or that you'd freak out." I finished for her, now seeing it all unfold in my mind. I had been so caught up in my own world, so unaware of the tension simmering just below the surface, that I had missed it. I had missed everything. "Yeah," she said, a slight edge to her voice now. "I thought you'd be mad at me for not telling you earlier, for not being honest." The irony of it all hit me hard then. She had been too afraid to be honest with me, too afraid that I'd freak out, when in reality, all I needed was a little truth. It wasn't just about Jake. It wasn't just about the relationship. It was about her, and the way she had kept me at arm's length, expecting me to be the understanding friend while I had been left in the dark. "I just wish you had told me," I said softly, my voice thick with emotion. "I didn't need to be in the middle of it all, but I just wish you had been open with me. I can't understand anything if I don't know the whole story." She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, I stood up. My head was spinning, and I couldn't stay in that coffee shop any longer. "I think I need some time to think about all this," I said, my voice shaking slightly. I didn't wait for her to say anything else. I couldn't. I turned and walked out of the shop, my mind racing, my heart heavy with everything I had just learned. The weight of the world felt unbearable in that moment, and I knew, deep down, that things would never be the same again. I walked aimlessly for what felt like hours, though I'm sure it was closer to just 20 minutes. My head was a whirlwind of confusion, anger, and a strange sadness that I couldn't quite shake. She'd kept so much from me, and I had been too trusting. The conversations we'd had, the moments I thought were real, the way she had smiled and acted as if everything was perfect, it was all a lie, at least in part. I found myself standing on a street corner, unsure of where I had walked or why I was still standing there. I leaned against the brick wall of a nearby building, trying to steady my thoughts, but they came in waves, crashing over me, pulling me under before I could catch my breath. She thought I was understanding. That's what stung the most. I had been played, no, manipulated, into thinking I knew what was going on in her life. But here I was, the fool. I had no idea. The whole time, she had been hiding the truth from me, choosing not to share a fundamental part of her life. And yet, there I was, the one who was supposed to be understanding, supposed to support her through something she couldn't even bother to explain. I checked my phone, as though hoping for some kind of message, but there was nothing. The text threads between us were empty, silent. No apology, no clarification, nothing. She's been hiding things from me for longer than I realized. I ran a hand through my hair, pacing back and forth. The anger, the hurt, it all started to build inside me like a pressure cooker. I had spent years being the supportive friend, the one who was always there when she needed someone, but now I felt as though I didn't know her at all. How could I have been so blind? And then there was Jake. She had mentioned him like he was some passing phase. He was her break, her off-again, on-again boyfriend. But that wasn't how she'd made him sound. She had talked about him as if they were just navigating a small rough patch, not the kind of relationship where breakups and new beginnings happened in rapid succession. What else had she been hiding? As if on cue, my phone buzzed, jolting me from my spiraling thoughts. I glanced at the screen. It was a message from her. "Hey, can we talk? I feel like there's so much I haven't explained. I'm really sorry if I made you feel left out. Please let me explain." I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the screen. I had half a mind to ignore it, to block her completely and never look back. She had crossed a line, and it hurt more than I could express. But at the same time, I couldn't deny the part of me that still cared for her. The part that wanted to hear what she had to say, even though I knew it might hurt me even more. I typed a response, my fingers moving almost on their own. "I don't know if I can just sit down and listen to your explanations right now. You kept too much from me. You lied to my face and made me look like a fool. I need space to figure out what I even mean to you. I hit send, immediately regretting the harsh tone. But no matter how I reworded it in my head, it didn't feel wrong. She had hurt me in ways I couldn't even put into words. A minute passed, then another. No response. I stuffed the phone into my pocket and tried to steady my breath, but the reality was sinking in more and more. I didn't know my best friend at all. The weight of that thought hit me harder than any betrayal. It wasn't just that she had been hiding the truth. It was the realization that I had been blind to everything. How long had I been walking around with my eyes shut? What did I really know about her? I had always been there for her. Always. I had listened to her rants, supported her decisions, laughed at her jokes, even when I didn't fully get them. I had done all of it, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I had considered her to be my best friend, the person I could count on, the one who'd be there when everything else fell apart. But now, in this moment, that image was shattered. She wasn't the person I thought she was. The harshest part of all was that she had been playing me. She hadn't even thought enough of me to bring me into her real life. It was like I had been relegated to the sidelines, to a secondary role in her story. I didn't know how to process all of this. Was it a lack of trust that had caused this distance? Was it just a coincidence, or had she truly been hiding the deeper aspects of her life from me for a while? I walked around the block, letting the cool breeze hit my face, hoping it would clear my head. But it didn't. All it did was make me realize even more how alone I felt in that moment. Sure, there were people around me, random faces passing by, cars honking, the usual bustle of the city, but I felt disconnected, untethered. The friends I thought I could rely on had become strangers, and the lines of our relationship had blurred into something unrecognizable. As I turned down another street, I saw a familiar face. It was Jake, my friend's on-a-break boyfriend. He was sitting on a park bench, one of his headphones in his ear, his other hand absently tossing a stone up and down in the air. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. Something in me urged me to keep walking, to avoid him altogether, but the curiosity gnawed at me. What was he doing here? Shouldn't he be with her, figuring out their relationship? They were supposed to be on a break, right? The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. If she had been lying about things with him, then why hadn't I noticed the subtle signs? Why had I been so understanding while he was out here, sitting alone like he was the only one who had a right to make decisions in their relationship? I took a deep breath and approached him. He noticed me almost immediately, and the look on his face was one of quiet recognition, but not much else. There was no greeting, no smile. "Hey, Jake," I said, my voice tight. "Can we talk?" His eyebrows furrowed slightly, but he nodded, pulling out his headphone and setting it on the bench next to him. He glanced up at me, waiting. "About what's going on with you and Emma," I said, feeling the tension building in my chest. "She's my friend, and I'm starting to think I don't know anything about what's going on between you two." His expression faltered for a split second, before he shrugged nonchalantly. "It's complicated. Things have been up and down." I clenched my fists at my sides. "No, Jake. You don't get it. I don't care if it's complicated. I care that she's been lying to me. I care that she hasn't told me what's really going on." Jake studied me carefully before leaning back on the bench. "She's been scared to tell you, man. She doesn't want to mess things up with you." A bitter laugh escaped me. "By lying to me?" "By protecting you," he said, his tone not unkind, but matter-of-fact. "She doesn't want to drag you into all the mess. She's always been careful with you. Doesn't want to make it worse." I was silent for a moment, processing his words. The anger was still there, but it was starting to take on a different shape. Not just betrayal, but confusion. Was she really trying to protect me? Was I the one who had misunderstood everything? And in that moment, standing on the edge of this revelation, I had no idea what the future held. I had no idea if I could forgive her, or if I even wanted to. I stood there for a long time, the cool wind biting at my skin, my thoughts a tangled mess. Jake's words echoed in my mind, but they didn't bring me any peace. If anything, they only made things more confusing. Protect me? Was that what she'd been trying to do? Or was that just another excuse to hide the truth from me? I couldn't tell. I didn't know her anymore. And maybe that was the worst part of all. Jake shifted uncomfortably, waiting for me to respond, but I didn't have anything to say right away. My mind was too clouded. The conversation felt like a heavy weight sitting on my chest, and I wasn't sure how much more I could carry. Finally, I broke the silence. "How long has this been going on?" He sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair. "It's been a while. Longer than you probably realize. My heart sank as the implications of his words settled in. How long? How long had she been keeping things from me? How long had I been blind to what was really going on in her life? I couldn't help but ask, why didn't you tell me? We're supposed to be friends, too. Jake didn't seem to have an answer right away. He just stared ahead, lost in thought for a moment, before speaking again. It's not as easy as it sounds. Mia's been through a lot, man. She's not the kind of person who likes to burden people with her problems, especially you. You're always trying to help, always trying to fix things. She didn't want to drag you down with her stuff. That hurt. More than I thought it would. I had always prided myself on being someone who could be relied on, someone who could handle the weight of things that others couldn't. But apparently, Mia didn't trust me with her burdens. And that cut deep. I don't know what to think about all of this, I muttered, taking a step back from him, my frustration building again. I feel like I've been living in a fantasy. Thinking I knew what was going on in her life, thinking we were close, but now I don't even know who she is. Jake seemed to soften a little, but he didn't try to defend Mia anymore. He just nodded, as though he understood my pain. I get it. But she's been trying to protect you from things you might not understand. Things she wasn't ready to tell you. I shook my head. No. I don't care about that. I care about the fact that she's been hiding things from me. If she had just been honest with me, we could have talked about it. But now, it feels like I've been played for a fool. There was another long silence. My head was spinning, and I was beginning to realize just how much of this situation had been out of my control. No matter how hard I tried to keep things together, it seemed like everything I thought I understood was slipping through my fingers. Finally, Jake spoke up again. Maybe you need to talk to her, man. Really talk to her. I know it's hard, but if you want to understand what's going on, you're going to have to hear it from her. Not from me. Not from anyone else. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with unspoken truth. I didn't want to talk to her. I didn't want to hear whatever half-hearted explanation she had prepared. But I couldn't deny that Jake was right. If I wanted answers, if I wanted any chance of making sense of all of this, I had to hear it from her. I felt a pang of hesitation. Part of me wanted to walk away from this whole mess and never look back. Part of me just wanted to cut ties with Mia, to erase her from my life and pretend like none of this ever happened. But I knew I couldn't do that. Not yet, anyway. The part of me that still cared for her, the part of me that remembered all the good times, the laughter, the shared moments, wasn't ready to let go. All right, I said, taking a deep breath. I'll talk to her. Jake nodded, a little relief in his eyes. Good. You'll figure it out. You're smarter than this, man. Just remember, it's not always what it looks like from the outside. I nodded, even though I didn't fully understand what he meant. I wasn't sure if I could ever understand any of this. I turned and walked away from Jake, my thoughts still a whirlwind. But this time, I didn't go straight to Mia's place. I needed to clear my head first. I needed to understand what I was going to say to her when the time came. I wandered through the streets aimlessly for a while longer, the cool night air doing little to calm the storm inside me. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I ignored it. I couldn't deal with another message from her, not yet. I needed space, and she had given me none. So now I was taking it. Eventually, I ended up at the park we used to go to together. It was quiet now, the soft hum of distant traffic and the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind the only sounds. I sat on one of the benches, my elbows resting on my knees, my head in my hands. I needed to think. I needed to find a way forward, even though I had no idea what that looked like anymore. Everything had changed. I looked up at the stars, wondering if they had any answers. I could feel the weight of all that was unsaid between Mia and me, the weight of the trust that had been broken, the weight of the person I used to be and the person I was becoming. I didn't know who I was anymore. But I knew I wasn't the same person who had walked into that conversation with Jake. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first step toward finding the truth. The day after talking to Jake, I woke up with a pounding headache. I hadn't slept well, my mind restless with too many questions and not enough answers. I didn't know what I was supposed to do next. Everything felt like a blur, like I was walking through someone else's life instead of my own. I dragged myself out of bed, the weight of the situation still pressing on my chest, and stumbled into the kitchen for a cup of coffee. It was a small comfort, the smell of the brewing coffee mingling with the empty space around me. As I stood there, watching the steam curl from my mug, I couldn't help but think about how much had changed. A few days ago, I had been living my life with certainty, thinking I knew where I stood with MIA. I had believed, with everything I had, that we were partners in this, whatever this was. But now? Now it felt like I had been living in a false reality. Mia's silence, the way she had distanced herself without explanation, had shattered everything I thought I understood about her. I picked up my phone, the screen lighting up as if by reflex, and saw her name at the top of the notifications. I froze, my thumb hovering over the screen for a long moment. There were 2 messages from her, both unread. Part of me wanted to throw the phone across the room, to pretend she didn't exist anymore, but another part of me, the part that had cared so deeply for her, wanted to know what she had to say. I clicked on the first message. I'm sorry for everything. Please don't think I've been lying to you. There's so much I need to explain. Can we talk? It was simple, too simple, and it did nothing to ease the pressure building inside my chest. She was sorry. She needed to explain. But she hadn't explained anything. Not yet. And as much as I wanted to believe that her apology was genuine, it felt like just another attempt to keep me at arm's length, just another promise that was bound to be broken. I scrolled down to the second message, which was sent an hour later. I'm not sure how to say this, but I've been dealing with something. It's not what you think. You deserve to know the truth, but I need to see you in person to explain. Please just hear me out. I set the phone down and rubbed my temples. Something? What was she dealing with? I had been replaying every interaction, every moment we shared over the past few weeks, trying to piece things together, but it never added up. She had always been so close, so present, and then suddenly, out of nowhere, she'd pushed me away. And I hadn't known why. I still didn't. I glanced at the time. It was almost noon, and I had no idea how to proceed. The last time I saw her, it had been nothing like this. We had sat together, laughed together, talked about the future as if everything was just fine. I had no idea what had changed between then and now. I texted her back, my fingers moving hesitantly over the keys. Fine. Let's talk. But this time, no more secrets. No more lies. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The next hour felt like an eternity. I couldn't sit still. I paced the apartment, my thoughts racing faster than I could keep up. I knew I had to be calm, collected, ready to hear whatever truth she was finally going to spill. But the anger and confusion were overwhelming. What if she was going to try to manipulate me again? What if she was just sorry because she'd been caught? The doubt was eating me alive, and I hated it. When the doorbell finally rang, I was already standing by the door, my heart hammering in my chest. I wasn't sure if I was ready for this conversation, but there was no turning back now. I opened the door, and there she was, standing on the other side, her eyes red and puffy, like she'd been crying for hours. I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She stepped forward, her hands shaking as she held them out toward me. I'm so sorry, she said, her voice breaking. I should have told you everything sooner. I didn't want to hurt you. I thought I could handle it on my own. I didn't want you to look at me like I was some mess. I took a step back, trying to create some distance between us, but her words hit me in a way I wasn't prepared for. It was the vulnerability in her voice, the rawness of her apology, that made my chest tighten. I wasn't ready to forgive her. Not yet. But I couldn't deny that I still cared for her. Then why didn't you tell me, MIA? Why keep this from me for so long? She looked down at her feet, her voice trembling. Because I was ashamed. I didn't want you to think I was weak, or that I didn't have it all together. You're always so strong, always so good. I didn't want you to see the parts of me that are broken. I felt a surge of frustration. You think I don't know what it's like to feel broken? You think I haven't been through my own struggles? We could have worked through this. Together. She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. I didn't want to burden you. I didn't want to pull you into my mess. It was like a switch flipped in my brain. The anger, the hurt, it all came rushing to the surface in an overwhelming wave. I had spent all this time thinking I was the one who wasn't enough, the one who had somehow missed all the signs. But Mia's words, the way she had treated me, like I was some kind of fragile thing that couldn't handle the truth, was just as much of a betrayal as the lies themselves. You don't get it, I said, my voice tight with emotion. It wasn't about you burdening me. It was about trust. You lied to me. You kept secrets from me. And now you want me to just let it all go because you feel guilty? She flinched at my words, but I didn't care. The dam had broken. I never asked for perfection from you. I just wanted the truth. That's all. But instead, you kept me in the dark while you dealt with whatever it was on your own. You didn't trust me. And that's what hurts the most. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The silence between us felt like a canyon, too wide to cross, too deep to climb out of. I didn't know if I could ever forgive her for this. I didn't know if I wanted to. Finally, she spoke again, her voice barely audible. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even know if I can forgive myself. But I want you to know that I'm sorry. For everything. And I'm ready to tell you everything now. I stared at her, my chest tight, my mind still racing with all the emotions I couldn't control. Could I handle it? Could I hear what she had to say? Would it change anything? The truth was, I didn't know. But I couldn't walk away without hearing it. Not now. Not after everything that had happened. Okay, I said finally, my voice low and steady. Tell me. And for the first time in what felt like forever, she began to speak. But as she did, I could feel the weight of everything that had come before pressing down on me. The question was no longer whether I could forgive her, it was whether I could even recognize the person she had become. She took a deep breath, her hands trembling as she clutched the edge of her sweater. I could see her struggle to find the right words, to piece together the truth that had been hidden for so long. I couldn't look away. I needed to hear it. As much as I feared it, I knew there was no turning back now. I didn't want to tell you because I was scared, she said finally, her voice barely a whisper. Scared of how you would look at me. Scared of what it might mean for us. She swallowed hard, wiping away a tear that had escaped from her eye. I've been seeing someone else, Ethan. For the last 6 months. The words hit me like a punch to the stomach, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. It felt like the room was closing in on me, the walls pressing down with the weight of what she had just confessed. Everything she had said in the past few days, the apologies, the tears, the vague promises to explain, suddenly made sense. But it didn't make it easier. It just made the pain sharper. She was still talking, but I couldn't process her words at first. I heard snippets, fragments of sentences, but they felt so distant, so muffled, as if we were no longer even on the same planet. The betrayal burned in my chest like a fire, and the confusion swirled around in my head like a storm. I'm sorry, she said again, voice breaking, her hands coming up to cover her face as the tears started to fall freely. I thought I could keep it from you. I thought if I kept pretending everything was fine, I could fix it somehow. But it's been too much, Ethan. I could feel my fists clench, my jaw tighten. The anger I had been holding in for so long finally bubbled to the surface, and I couldn't stop it. I had to say something. You thought you could keep it from me? The words escaped in a low growl, thick with disbelief. You really thought I wouldn't find out? That I wouldn't see through the lies? Her gaze flickered toward the floor. I never wanted to hurt you, Ethan. I swear, I didn't. I scoffed, shaking my head as the realization hit me harder than anything else. And yet, here we are. There was a long silence between us, the kind that gnawed at the soul. I wasn't sure what I wanted to say, or even if there were words that could fix what had happened. How do you respond to something like this? How do you process the fact that the person you trusted most in the world had shattered that trust, piece by piece, without you ever knowing? She tried again, her voice desperate. I didn't want it to be this way. I didn't want to hurt you. But I couldn't stop myself, Ethan. I couldn't. I've been so lost for so long, and when I met him, it felt like I finally had something real. Something that made me feel alive again. I flinched at the words, and the pain I had been trying to suppress shot through me. Something real? Is that what you call it? After everything we've built together? After everything I've done for you, for us? Her face contorted with guilt, her lips trembling as she shook her head. I never meant to make you feel worthless, Ethan. But I was. I was falling apart inside, and I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't know how to make you understand. You should have tried, I said, my voice low but cutting. You should have come to me. You should have trusted me to help you. I know, she whispered. I know. And I'm so sorry. I'm not asking for your forgiveness, because I don't deserve it. I just needed you to know the truth. There it was. The truth. The one thing I had been waiting for, the thing that had been hiding behind all her excuses, her late nights, her silence. And yet, hearing it out loud didn't make me feel any better. In fact, it felt worse. The weight of it all pressed down on me in a way I wasn't prepared for. I could feel the knot in my stomach tightening, and for the first time, I wondered if I had ever really known her. Who was MIA? The woman standing before me now was a stranger, someone I didn't recognize. I can't just forget this, Emma. I said, the bitterness creeping into my voice. I can't just move on and pretend this didn't happen. I know, she said softly. I don't expect you to. I don't even know how to fix this. I don't even know if it's possible to fix it. Her voice cracked, and she wiped another tear from her cheek. I just wanted you to hear me. I wanted you to know that it wasn't about you. It wasn't about us. It was about me and my own mistakes. I didn't know how to handle everything, and I ended up pushing you away. The vulnerability in her voice was undeniable, but it didn't make the pain go away. It didn't undo the betrayal that was still coursing through my veins like poison. You didn't know how to handle everything. I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. You couldn't handle this? You couldn't talk to me? You couldn't trust me? I'm sorry, she repeated again, the words losing their meaning with every time she said them. I'm sorry, Ethan. I really am. And I know that's not enough, but I don't know what else to say. I looked at her for a long moment, trying to see the person I had fallen in love with, trying to find some trace of her among the hurt and the lies. But I couldn't. There was nothing left to hold on to, no bridge to cross back to what we had. The foundation was cracked, shattered by her actions, and there was no way to rebuild it. I don't think I can do this anymore, Anna. I said, the words feeling heavy on my tongue. I can't keep pretending everything is fine. I can't keep putting myself through this. Her eyes widened in shock, the color draining from her face as she took a step back. Ethan, please. But I couldn't listen anymore. The damage was done. There was no going back. I need to go, I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. I need some space. I need to figure this out. And you need to figure out what you want. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the doorway, the weight of everything between us too much to bear. I didn't look back.